And I want to start by making the assertion, it's not the customer's job to hand you the solution. They're very bad at it. They're not very creative. Their job is simply to articulate needs with your help in getting them to do so. It's your job to come up with these things here, these solutions. That's a really fundamental separation, and I think the biggest flaw in all of the field of new product development is confusing the need with the solution to the need. Here. So let's be real clear about what customers can and can't tell us. I would argue that in fact customers do know what they want.
Yeah.
But let's be clear. They understand their wants and needs. They probably don't understand the features or solutions that will actually satisfy those needs. And the reason is they're not engineers, they're not in a position to set technical specs for you. They're only in a position to articulate wants and needs that give you clues as to what those technical specs ought to be. And so to do good product development, what you're trying to do is not come up with products that are designed by your customers, but rather products that are inspired by what you learn from customers. And to do that, you've got to get beyond this knee-jerk conversation that all engineers want to have with customers, where they want to ask them what features do they want, what solutions. A classic line from engineers is, just give me the specs, I'll figure it out, just give me the specs, okay? That's the wrong conversation to have with customers. They're not very good at it. What you're trying to get at is the real underlying needs. And there's a modern incarnation of this quote from another Harvard Business School professor named the famous Clay Christensen, who wrote a book called The Innovator's Dilemma, and he's the guy that coined the term disruptive innovation. And what he says, and to me it's just an updating of this, is he says, when people have jobs to do, they hire products and services to do them. Focus on the job first, not the product. That comes second. Okay, let's go on to another example. Let's say we're in automotive and the customer tells us they want a roomy front seat. Well, I can tell you that in that industry, the things they measure are, and they're very standardized ways of measuring this, are things like leg room and shoulder room and hip room and the distance from the tip of the nose to the windshield and the top of the head to the roof. I like to refer to those as knobs we can turn. They're design knobs. And I can turn each one of those up a little or down a little. And if I get just the right combination, the customer will come back and say, yeah, that's a roomy front seat. But no customer walks into a dealer and says, I need a car with at least 42 centimeters of hip room and so much leg room and all of that. So again, the engineer sitting at the CAD/CAM terminal is faced with a problem of translating a soft customer word like roomy into a technical spec that's measurable and controllable in the design of the product. Okay, the customer generally can't tell you. So, again, what's the antidote? I'm going to have to talk a lot to the customer about roomy front seats. What kinds of questions might I want to ask them?
What kind of car they drive now?
Good point. The experience with current products. Yeah, what else?
Who drives? I mean, if you're 6 foot and somebody else is 5 foot, it's going to mean very different things for their car. So you know who's going to be actually sitting in the seat to be able to adjust it and that kind of stuff.
Very good. Who's going to be the driver, the actual user? Yep. Anything else?
I mean, what do you consider roomy? Like, do you need to have more space around you to be, what if you're claustrophobic? You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, although again, the customer might not be able to do that, but I like the idea of, I want to hear about cars you've had in the past that felt more roomy or less roomy.
Okay.
In other words, I can focus on experiences they've had in the past. If I have prototypes, I could ask people to sit in prototypes, but prototypes aren't a trivial thing to build. They're quite expensive, and so that's an issue as well in industrial product. So now we've completed our voice of the customer. As you can see, this is not a trivial thing to do. It's a fair amount of work to do a really good VOC, okay? But now the question becomes, so what do we do with all this data? How do we interpret it? How do we decide what to do following this and what to work on. And let me start by telling you the simplest and by far the most useful analysis you can do. And I know all the jokes. It's to create a quadrant graph. The jokes are, what's the definition of a consultant?
Create a quadrant.
It's someone who presents data using a 2x2 matrix. And sorry, guilty as charged. But at any rate, this is a very simple analysis that actually tells us quite a bit. What we do is we take those prioritization ratings, the importance ratings and the performance or satisfaction ratings, and we map all of the needs. So this is the average importance score, and the dimension is from high to moderate to low. This is the average satisfaction score from high to moderate to low. Now, where do we draw the crosshatch? I find rather than drawing it at the center of the scale itself, meaning at 5 on a 10-point scale or 50 on a 100-point scale, because people always skew the numbers to the upper half of the scale, it's better to draw the crosshatch at the grand mean. So in other words, I take the overall average importance score and the, across all 18 attributes or however many you have, the average satisfaction score, and that's where I draw the crosshatch. That way, when I map the individual needs, about half of them will be to the right and half to the left, half will be above and half will be below. I'd like to distribute them fairly evenly across that. Now, why is this graph so useful? Because where a need falls tells us a lot about what we ought to do with that need. Here's what we found. We actually refer to this as the quadrant of hidden opportunities. And what do we mean by that? What you find is, yes, some of these needs are truly unimportant. And if they're unimportant, maybe you don't mess with them. But we've also found that there are certain needs that get rated as less important because customers just assume it can't be done.
Sure.
And they almost give you a pass. In some cases, someone finds a way to innovate, and all of a sudden people look up and say, wait a minute, that actually is something that's important to me. And over time, first it moves over here, good performance, and then it moves up there. And the example I love to give on this one is something from my own experience. When I was a kid, if you wanted portable music, and I'm older than I look, what do you think you carried back in the 50s and 60s if you wanted portable music? Some of you guys that are a little older might remember.
Transistor radio.
Transistor radio, who said boombox? That was so 80s, that was so after me. It's incredible. No, not boombox. Yeah, right. But transistor radio, what was the sound quality like on a transistor radio, Randy?
Very poor. I mean, it was a little tin cup.
Exactly. It had a little 1-inch, tinny kind of sound. You would ask me back then about how important was sound quality in portable music. I would have said very unimportant, and yeah, performance stinks. Okay? But what happened? I remember for my birthday in 1986, my kids gave me my first Walkman. Anybody remember the first time you put on the headphones in a Walkman?
Mm-hmm.
What was your reaction?
Wow.
Wow, this is amazing.
Yeah.
So Dr. Morita at Sony basically found a way to improve sound quality in portable music, and it's over here. First, the VOC process allows and affords a couple of good things. First, it allows company to tie their design decisions, whether it's product or service or business process or any of that stuff. It allows them to tie their design decisions directly to customer needs. That's often not done. It's a way of being methodical rather than anecdotal. I still find too many companies that make their product development decisions based on one sales rep who comes back and says, my customer says we need to do this. Okay? So a word I like to use is it's dispassionate. It's an objective way of making design decisions.